Hi, my name's Phil. I like to talk about politics, and in this video, I'd like to discuss how whichever of the Tory leadership contenders replaces Rishi Sunak on November the 2nd, they'd better watch their backs because Boris Johnson is not being remotely subtle about his intentions to replace them in another 2 or 3 years. But first, for daily political commentary, please click the subscribe button so you don't miss out. So according to some journalists who've been reading advanced copies of Boris Johnson's memoirs, it sounds like not only an attempt to spin his time in office as a great success, which is what all political memoirs do, to be fair, but also charting a path back to Downing Street for him in the future. References to the idea of, if the new leader doesn't manage to take the fight to Labour, then I could be persuaded to return in a few years. That kind of thing. But because there are so many in the party who still think Boris Johnson can win elections, the offer of him just being available will have a destabilising effect on the new Tory leader, even if they did make largely the right moves, which is unlikely. With or without Johnson's interference, the Conservative leaders on offer do not sound like they've got a plan. Even if we forget that the public simply will not listen to the Tories for some years yet, unless Labour mess up spectacularly, and that the collapse of support amongst working age voters is a huge crisis for them. The actual individuals have just got too much going against them. Kemi Badenoch, always looking for fights, even with her own side, picks fights with her own side. And she's just demonstrated her political naivety again in calling for popular policies that are unpopular even amongst Conservatives this week. Robert Jenrick, he's got a fair few damaging scandals attached to his past, which he struggles to deal with when they come up in interviews. Those questions will just keep coming if he becomes Conservative leader. And accusing British soldiers of murder, that wasn't a great look either. James Cleverly, too closely associated with Sunak and Truss, and his legacy in cabinet is one of actually failing to achieve anything. Tom Tugendhat doesn't really know what he wants to be. He's made almost no impact on the leadership contest other than claiming that we can just chop whatever bits of the ECHR we don't like, which is obviously completely untrue. Whichever one of these replaces Sunak is going to have to do some party rebuilding before they can actually have a platform to take Labour on again. And by the time this happens, well, Labour could well be at the point at which the very obvious tangible benefits start to emerge of the work they're doing now. Shorter waiting lists, better roads, better public transport, better pay in real terms, cleaner rivers. So at just the point that a Tory leader who knows what they're doing has fixed the Conservative Party machine, they will then be bombarded with a Labour government saying, look, it is actually possible to fix these things after all. Look at that. That would be tough enough for any Conservative leader, even a good one, without the threat of Boris Johnson waiting in the wings, offering to come back and show them how it's done. As one anonymous Tory said, Johnson doesn't want to be leader of the opposition. He'll only want to come back after getting about 10 million quid in the bank and just enough time to prepare for the following election. And that is very believable. Boris Johnson isn't offering to come back if the new leader doesn't work out. He's expecting them not to work out. He's making it clear, as far as I can tell, that party members and MPs can think of Sunak's replacement as a sort of interim leader while he enjoys a few more years of raking in the cash. And the Tory media will be more than happy to promote this idea as well. Boris Johnson is very good for political news stories, so they would love a return, regardless of what they think his effectiveness in government would be. So after 2 years or so, don't be surprised to see little comment pieces along the lines of, whoever's the Tory leader at the time, still failing to make headway. Perhaps it's time to go back to basics with Boris. And after a few months of this, Johnson will presumably announce that he doesn't want to undermine his former colleagues in Parliament, but he remains available to serve should the need arise. A little nod to MPs that if they feel like it, they can arrange a safe by-election in order for him to return to Parliament, followed shortly by another bit of regicide. Now, you might be thinking that Johnson's allies may struggle to make this happen because the COVID inquiry will be over by then, including the procurement module, which should be particularly damaging to Boris Johnson's reputation. And but Johnson's allies are very good at ignoring inconvenient facts. For example, when they say he should never have resigned in the first place, they were ignoring the fact that he was still on course for losing the election, but maybe they imagined he'd turn things around. Okay. But he was also just months away from being kicked out of Parliament for lying anyway. They have this conviction he has some sort of magical Houdini-like powers and he can just conjure up election wins, no matter the apparent odds against him. So whoever replaces Sunak should probably be aware that they will get somewhere between 2 and 3 years, at which point, if polling doesn't point to a likely Conservative win at the next election, and, you would think it's unlikely to, then the whispers about Boris Johnson being available will begin. Because it's one thing when MPs think there are no better options than the leader they have. They'll get behind them on the understanding that disunity loses elections. But if they think there's a better offer available, then a bit of disunity seems worth it for the reward on offer. And, there are not many commentators who think that any of the Tory leadership contenders are very good. But anyone would have a tough enough job ahead of them. They've got to unite a warring party behind a common cause. They have to try and trip Labour up before they can start to show tangible benefits to key voters. Because if the Tories have any chance at all of overtaking Labour in the polls, it's surely over the next couple of years before the benefits start to really emerge. Otherwise, it's all over. They've somehow got to persuade younger voters that their attitudes have changed, which none of them seem prepared to do. And they also have to weather the storm of further revelations, including COVID inquiry and COVID fraud investigations. And on top of all that, they'll have to contend with an unknown number of colleagues, I don't know how many, who just view them as a seat filler until Boris Johnson decides it's ready to return and replace them. If whoever replaces Sunak intends to lead their party into the next election, then on top of everything else, they're going to have to watch their back. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. If you've enjoyed the video, please click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, you can join for memberships. Thanks for watching. And until next time, I'll see you later.